Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Van Auken, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director and CEO for Developmental Pathways. Developmental Pathways is a community-centered board, or CCB, and we serve Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert counties, as well as the entire city of Aurora. As a CCB, we serve about 8,500 children, adults, and their families with intellectual and developmental disabilities and delays every year. We serve these folks by connecting them to resources, helping to coordinate federal and state spending, as well as stewarding local support dollars from Douglas, Arapahoe, and Adams counties. One of the most important items we are proud to partner with our community around is voter engagement efforts. Voting is an important way that you can make your voice heard in your community. And I have the benefit of seeing all of our panelists right now, but I'll tell you, the most attractive panelist we have on today is Evan, because he's got his I voted sticker on his shirt. So good job, Evan. Voting is an important way, as I mentioned, that you can make your voice heard in our community. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to our advocacy and county partners for their continued collaboration. I would also like to quickly thank all of our important panelists for investing their time in this vital work. Now it's my pleasure to turn this over to Kim Tenure, who is Developmental Pathways Associate Director of IDD Policy. Kim?
Thanks so much, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just in the afternoon, so good afternoon. And thank you all so much for joining us for this collaborative event. We're so excited again that you tuned in to be informed about the voting process. Our format today is going to be relatively simple. We're going to do short 5 to 7 minute presentations. I think of it as an educational speed dating event. After each presentation, we'll open it up for questions from the audience for about 5 to 7 minutes. Your questions will be directly related to the presentation you just heard. You can enter your questions directly into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hand and our tech support guru, Andrea, will unmute you. After about 5 minutes, we'll move on to the next presentation. Don't worry though, we'll still have plenty of time for questions at the very end. While you'll learn more about each panelist today when they do their presentation, I do want to do just a quick introduction so you know who you're going to hear from. We have Luke from Douglas County Elections, Evan, one of our DP voter engagement interns, Olivia from Disability Law Colorado, Hani and Erica from the Arc Aurora and Think Change, Dawn from Colorado Cross Disability Coalition or CCDC, Luke from Arc Arapahoe and Douglas counties, Peg from Arapahoe County's Elections, and Nick, who's another DP intern for voter engagement. So finally, without further ado, let's get it started. Luke from Douglas County is going to kick us off by talking about who can vote in Colorado.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. As Kim mentioned, I'm the Election Services Manager here in Douglas County in beautiful Castle Rock. I handle voter registration for everybody within Douglas County and keep the rolls up to date and make sure that ballots get sent out to every registered voter. We've got our email address here, and I know later on we'll get everybody will get the contact. But anytime, give us a phone call. Shoot us an email. We'd love to help you out if you have additional questions or you think of something later. But that's who I am. I'm Luke Dakin. I'm the Election Services Manager here in Douglas County. Next slide, please. So to answer the question, who is allowed to vote in Colorado? I've got kind of the 4 requirements here. You have to be a citizen of the United States who's a resident of Colorado. You have to be at least 18 years old. You have to have lived in Colorado for at least 22 days before the election day, and you have to register to vote. But much past that, that's the real broad stroke. Who can vote in Colorado? If I can get next slide, please. There is one exception. If you're a convicted felon who is serving a sentence of incarceration or detention for that felony, so basically if you're in jail on a felony, you're not allowed to vote. But please note that If you're on parole, you're able to vote. If you're detained in jail while you're pending trial, you're allowed to vote. And if you're even in jail serving a sentence for misdemeanor conviction, you are allowed to vote, and there's specific procedures to make sure that that is able to happen. So the only people not allowed to vote are convicted felons who are in jail on that felony conviction. Next slide, please. So kind of to review the bottom line stuff here is you can vote in Colorado. Like I said, if you're 18 years old, if you're a US citizen, you're allowed to vote if you're on parole. You're allowed to vote if you're hospitalized. You're allowed to vote if you're in a mental health institution or a state-run facility, a nursing facility, or other large setting type group. You needn't vote if you're homeless or without a fixed permanent residence. You are still able to vote. If I can get the next slide, please. Just kind of again to cover over that, Colorado does not have any restrictions on the right to vote based on disability, based on mental conditions, based on residence or homelessness, or based on any other prior status. We actually have specific provisions in Colorado law to assist those who are in a healthcare facility, to assist those who are possibly in jail, or those who have a disability, to ensure that you're able to cast your vote. You're protected, and some of our other presenters will probably cover, more of the specifics on how to do that. But that is, those are people who, there are no restrictions, contrary to anything you may have heard. If I can get the next slide, please. And again, really just to reiterate, it really is this simple. If you're a US citizen, if you've lived in Colorado for 22 days before the election day, and you register to vote, and you can do that all the way up through election day, then you're allowed to vote in Colorado. Again, as long as you're not currently in jail for a felony conviction, that's as easy as it gets. And next slide, please. And again, here's our contact information. If you'd like to register to vote, you have questions about voting, about elections, anything in the process, please feel free to reach out to the Douglas County Elections Office. We're here to serve. We're here to help anybody out. You've got our phone number there, our email address, our mailing address here in Castle Rock, which is actually our physical address if you want to stop by. And then we've got our website, douglasvotes.com, which has links on registering to vote and tons of information about where you can drop ballots off, where you can vote in person, and just information about elections. Because like I said, we'd love to help you. And if you have any questions, please let me know or reach out to the office, and we'd love to help you. And I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke. Are there any questions from the audience before I pull some questions that people had when they registered? I don't see any in the question and answer. Does any of our attendees want to raise their hand? Okay, well, while we wait to see if anyone does have questions, Luke, perhaps you could answer a question that's come up a lot for us at Developmental Pathways and was very much an interest of our interns. If you have a guardian in Colorado, are you allowed to vote your own ballot?
Yeah, Kim, you certainly can. Again, as long as you're registered to vote, and meet all those qualifications, then you, the actual voter or citizen, would be the one who would be able to cast your ballot. You get your ballot, you make your selections, sign your envelope, and you can return that in the mail or drop box, or get it back to us a lot of ways. But you can certainly vote. There's no requirement upon if you have a guardian or whatever, you're still eligible to vote as long as you meet the basic qualifications.
Wonderful. And we did have another question come in. So I think Jenny, your question might be a two-part question for two of our speakers, but I'm sure Luke can answer it. Jenny wants to know, does it matter what county you live in for where you vote or where you turn your ballot in?
Thanks for the question, Jenny. In terms of where you would vote, generally you would, depending on your county, that's where you would vote. That's who would send you your ballot, and you'd receive it. So you can fill that out. If you put it in the mail with your ballot envelope, it'll automatically get to where it needs to be. Those are pre-printed to get to the correct county. And again, if you do want to use a drop box, then you can drop that in any of the Colorado drop boxes. You can live in Douglas County and go up, up into Aurora or Littleton and drop it off in one of the Arapahoe County boxes. We'll make sure that it gets to the correct county. And then if you want to vote in person, again, you can vote at any of those polling centers throughout the state, but to get your full ballot for the county you live in, you need to be at the one that your county's polling centers. But there are ways you can vote on just the Colorado overall ballot issues at any of those polling centers. But generally, if you put your ballot right back in the mail or in any drop box in the state, it'll get to the right county. We'll get it counted, no problems.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Luke. I don't see any additional questions from our audience. So if you do still think of a question, please make sure you write it down or you remember it. We'll have time to come back to it at the end. Let's move on to our next presentation. This presentation is Evan, who's one of Developmental Pathways voter engagement interns. Evan, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Evan. I'm an intern for Developmental Pathways, and I'm here to tell you how to register to vote. It's not as hard as you think. Next slide. First time to register, let's watch this video.
Are you ready to vote for the first time? If you're a U.S. citizen, meet your state's requirements, and will be 18 by Election Day, you can vote. But first, you need to register before your state's deadline. Check with your local election office. You can register there, or you may be able to register online at the Department of Motor Vehicles or using the National Mail Voter Registration Form. Your election office may send you a voter registration card listing your polling place. On Election Day, that's where you'll go. When you get there, you may need to show an ID to vote. Then, fill out your ballot. If you don't know how, ask a poll worker. If you know you won't be able to get there on Election Day, you may qualify to vote by mail. Remember, voting rules are different in every state. Learn more about voting at usa.gov/voting.
This is some of the information you will need to register. You will need your legal name and birth date, Colorado driver's license. If no license, you need to provide your social security number or proof of residency, address where you live, and your political affiliation is optional. Next slide. These are 3 ways to register how to vote in Colorado. You can do it online, by mail, and also in person at some location. Next. For online, click on the link and then follow it. Then on yes. Register online, then follow the steps. Next slide. For paper registration, click on a link, print out the copy, and fill it out. And then when you're done filling it out, turn it in. Next slide. The next few pages answer some questions frequently asked. Take a look when you can. Last slide. Next. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. In summary, registering to vote is easy, fast, safe, and secure, so don't make it an excuse. Get registered, vote, and make a difference in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evan. That was a great presentation. Those FAQs, just to let everyone know, those were from the Secretary of State's website. And when you get the PowerPoints, they will be included there for you. Evan just wanted to make it really easy. Evan, was it easy to register to vote?
Yeah, I had no problem. So
Perfect. Are there any
not
other
as
questions?
hard as you think.
Well named. Are there any other questions from our audience? Okay, I don't see any. So why don't we move on to the next presenter? Thank you, Evan. And Evan will also be around at the end in case anyone does have additional questions. So our next presenter is going to be Olivia from Disability Law Colorado. Olivia?
Hi, everyone. As Kim said, my name is Olivia Pilcher, and I'm the Vote Program Coordinator for Disability Law Colorado. And I'm going to be talking to you all about the ways that you can vote. So next slide, please. So in Colorado, there are a few different ways you can vote. You can vote in person, by mail, or by electronic ballot. Next. So first, we'll talk about in-person voting. If you choose to vote in person, you can vote up until and on election day. If you do vote in person, you will need an acceptable form of identification. The great news is that in Colorado, there are a lot of different forms of identification that can be used if you choose to vote in person. To name a few, you can use a Colorado driver's license or an identification card. You can also use a Medicaid or a Medicare card to prove your identity. And there's a full list of acceptable forms of identification on the Secretary of State's website. So if you have any questions about that, I would encourage you to go to that website and look at all of the different forms of ID you can use. If you go and vote in person, as Evan already stated, you can update and register to vote for the first time if you choose. So if you have moved between elections, or if something has changed, which requires you to update your registration and you for some reason don't do it ahead of time, no, you can always go and do that in person at a voting service and polling center. At all voting service and polling centers, there is an accessible voting machine. And I know the next presenters are going to talk a little bit more about accommodations and accessibility, but I always like to point that out. All VSPCs must also be physically accessible under the Americans with Disabilities Act standards. And you can locate your VSPC through your county clerk's website or through the justvotecolorado.org website. It is important to look at your VSPC locations every election. Sometimes they change. So I would encourage you to look at those every time you go to vote so you make sure you're going to the correct place. Next slide. So in Colorado, everybody receives a mail-in ballot as long as you're registered to vote at least 8 days prior to the election. It's important to know that there's no way to opt out of this. So even if you would like to vote in person, you'll still receive this mail-in ballot. It's just important that you only vote one way. So if you choose to vote in person, that you're not returning your mail-in ballot. And if you choose to vote by mail, that you're not voting in person. Mail-in ballots can be mailed with postage, or they can be dropped at a drop box, or you can return it to your voting service and polling center. And again, you can locate those locations through your county clerk's website. If you mail your ballot, it's important to know that your ballot has to arrive by 7 p.m. on election day. So just make sure that it's put in the mail with plenty of time to get to your county clerk's office. That way you can ensure that your ballot is counted. Next. So electronic ballots for people with disabilities is a relatively new system here in Colorado. The system was first used in the 2020 election, and in the last legislative session through SB 21-188, we updated the rules. So there is now electronic delivery of ballots and return for individuals with physical and print disabilities. For other individuals who don't meet the criteria of having a physical or a print disability, you can still vote electronically if that is the method you choose, but you do have to print your ballot. You also have to provide an acceptable form of identification if you vote this way. So during the 22 days before an election, you can access your electronic ballot or view a sample ballot. And you'll do that by going to myballot.sos.colorado.gov. And in order to request that electronic ballot, you'll have to provide the following verification information, which would be your first and last name, your date of birth, your county, and either your state ID number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. So after you submit that information and the voter information is verified, you'll select that you want to vote an accessible ballot, and you'll certify that you're a voter with a disability and meet the criteria to use that system, and you'll be able to access your ballot electronically. So this is another option for individuals who need an accessible way to vote from home. If that's, for some reason they can't go to the polling center, if that's their preferred method, but they're not able to use the paper ballot, this is a great option for them. So next slide. So to prepare to vote, it's important that everybody updates their registration or registers to vote for the first time. To also check your mail ballot status. So you can go to myballot.sos.colorado.gov and you can look at when your mail ballot was sent to you, and just make sure you're getting the updates. You can also, if you choose to register for an electronic ballot, make sure that you're doing that so it's delivered to you in the method that you would like it to be. You can also look at your sample ballot, which is something that can be really helpful to do, especially if you're going to vote in person. And oftentimes when I vote in person, I actually take a sample ballot with me so I know how I'm going to vote on different issues. Just kind of as a reminder, a cheat sheet when I go and vote in person. And you can also review the blue book so you know the issues that are going to be voted on in the upcoming election. Next slide. Okay, great. So that's the end of my slides. That was just an overview of how to vote in Colorado. Does anybody have any questions?
Looks like we have a question that did pop up in the chat. Regarding the electronic ballot, what is needed to verify qualified disability?
Yeah, so as far as the disability requirement for the electronic ballot, you would just have to verify that you qualify as an individual with a disability as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that's a pretty broad definition, and we can definitely get you the specific language if that would be helpful. And then the criteria for being able to use electronic return is a little more narrowly defined. And it's an individual who has a print disability. So that could be a visual impairment or anything that requires, additional assistance with reading or writing, and then a physical disability. And Kim, I'm happy to get you that specific language too, so people know exactly who would qualify under those requirements.
That would be wonderful.
Perfect.
One more question for you, Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to vote on every issue on the ballot?
Great question. No, you don't. So if there is a specific issue that you're not sure on, it's not an all or nothing way that you have to vote. You can vote on the issues or for the people that you would like to. And if there are certain things that you don't want to vote on or certain people you don't have an opinion on, you certainly do not have to vote on every issue on the ballot.
Perfect. And I hope that after today, after you get through all of our presentations, you'll feel more empowered as a participant and as a voter to know where to go to research those questions. But absolutely, you do not have to fill out every candidate or every ballot measure. Any other questions from the audience? Well, great. Thank you so much, Olivia. And we'll move on to our next presenters, which are Hani and Erica from the Arc Aurora and Think Change.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. My name is Erica Dennison, and I am also joined by my colleague, Connie Rayleigh. We are here from the Arc of Aurora, which is a not-for-profit advocacy organization in Aurora, Colorado, that has individual advocates that provide advocacy to children and adults of all ages with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. And we also have a training and education program called Think Change. So we are here to talk a little bit about inclusion and access of voters with developmental disabilities, because they are still guaranteed the right to access campaign, rally, and election spaces, and to vote privately and independently as prescribed by federal laws. Next slide, please.
So you have already heard that, of course, you have the right to vote, among many other rights that you have. But along with that, you also have the right to be provided reasonable accommodations that you need to be able to do so successfully. There's a couple of federal laws that really help support this. The Voting Rights Act itself is really one of the most effective pieces of civil rights legislation, and it essentially eliminates illegal barriers on the rights to vote. The Americans with Disabilities Act that Olivia mentioned also covers your reasonable accommodations in polling places, specifically under Title II of the ADA, requires state and local governments to ensure that people with disabilities have full access and opportunity to all of the pieces of voting, as well as the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, and that requires jurisdictions responsible for those federal elections to provide at least one accessible voting system at each polling place. For us, and I'm sure for everyone else here, inclusion and access for voters with disabilities is not just good practice, it's the law. Next slide, please.
So we just want to talk a little bit about voters with developmental disabilities. And you may or may not know, but a developmental disability is a group of conditions due to maybe physical, learning, language, or behavior impairments. So some better known ones, maybe like autism, intellectual disabilities, or cerebral palsy, is just a very small amount, few. There are actually hundreds out there. But as a voter with a developmental disability, we want to take a look at some of the accommodations that you have the right to request and access, because a developmental disability does not directly impact your right to vote as a U.S. citizen. So you have the right to vote privately and independently, and you do not need to share your vote or ballot with anyone, whether that's your family, friends, caregiver, host and provider, agency, anyone. If you want to keep it private, that's all good. You have equal access to information and communication, just like any other voter would. So if you need them, you can use things such as devices or services to help with your communication, such as like sign language interpreters, devices such as like video remote interpreting, captioning, written notes, and visuals, just to name a few. That is all okay. You can use a variety of different ways to assist you with, seeing, hearing, mobility, reading. And you can bring your assistive technology with you if you need it, if you're voting in person. And yes, you can absolutely bring your service animal to the polling place where any other voter would be able to vote. Next slide, please.
So you've heard that your polling place should be accessible, but that means way more than just like having a parking spot or having accessible bathrooms. So you should expect that your polling place has the voting equipment that you need, and one that's accessible for voters who are blind or have low vision. You should also have voting booths that are actually adjustable and accessible for folks using wheelchairs or any other kind of adaptive aids. And those workers that are there supporting all of the voters that are coming in should be trained on how to use all of these accessible machines and booths. The machines have to guarantee, or they do have to give you the same access, privacy, and independence that every other voter that walks in is guaranteed. And they have to function properly. It's not good enough to have them, but then they don't work and then nobody knows how to support you with it. And as Olivia mentioned earlier, Colorado is fabulous with the mail-in and the drop-off ballot. So if the polling place is still not a place that you want to cast your ballot, make sure you make that request for accessible ballots to use at home. Next slide, please.
So voters with developmental disabilities absolutely have the right to bring someone to help them vote. Maybe that's a friend, family member, caregiver, someone who maybe lives with them, or almost anyone else. And you still have the right, though, to vote privately and independently. But a question that has already come up is, well, what if you have a guardian? Luke kind of reviewed a little bit about that earlier. And, some people with developmental disabilities do have guardians that help them make, important decisions for daily living. And every state has their own voting laws and guardianship laws. And you can't vote in every state if you have a guardian. But in Colorado, you still have the right to vote independently if you have a guardian. And you have the right to do so independently without sharing your choices with your guardian. So your guardian does not get to decide if you can vote. If Colorado law says that you can vote, then it's your choice to participate. Next slide, please.
So with all rights, sometimes you get stuck, or there might be organizations or election places that aren't really respecting your rights, and perhaps it might be violated. So if you ever have questions about your right to vote, how to vote, the accommodations that you could request and what you should expect after you request those, definitely reach out to your local county election division, or of course, any of your local ARC chapters. We're all here to help support and make sure that you feel comfortable in being able to cast your ballot in a place that is good for you to do so. If you also feel like there's maybe a little bit more that your polling place could utilize as far as making it a super accessible location, you can reach out to us at Think Change, and we've got an Every Voter Counts training and a poster that we've smacked up in other polling places. But if you feel ultimately that your right to vote is being violated or prevented, you can file an election complaint with the Colorado Secretary of State. Usually it's a HAVA complaint, remember HAVA, one of those federal rules. Or you could reach out to Disability Law Colorado and Olivia that came before us to help you in completing that application or the written complaint, or exploring any other potential avenues to make sure that everyone has the right to vote, because we know every voter counts. Next slide, please.
So thank you so much. Again, my name is Erica Dennison. I was also joined by Hani Rayleigh. We're from the Arc Aurora and Think Change. So does anyone have any questions on the next slide for us?
So Erica, we do have a question from the Q&A. How long has accessible polling been available? And then this is fantastic.
So accessible polling is really made possible through Title II of the ADA. When it comes to the exact date, I don't have an answer on when that was, but the ADA has been around for many decades. So that's how I would probably give information about that question.
One more question, Erica and Hani. You both talked about how you can bring someone to the polling place to help you. Can you bring someone in the polling booth to help you?
As long as that person is included as a reasonable accommodation for you to be able to access your ballot. So the goal for those ballot boxes or the little polling places that you go is that you have the space to do so privately and confidentially. But it's important to let that poll worker know if you require this human, whoever that might be, to be able to support you in casting your ballot.
Perfect. So we're already seeing some underpinnings of self-advocacy with voting that we're going to explore a little bit later. Great. Well, thank you so much. Are there any other questions for Hani or Erica? If there are, please don't hesitate to throw them in the Q&A. I have a list of questions we're going to go back to later. Great. Well, we'll move on to John from CCDC.
Hi, I am Dawn, Community Engagement Coordinator with Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. We look for the social justice of all people with disabilities in Colorado. And we believe that people with disabilities should vote. And it's really sometimes difficult to find quality information for voting and learning about the issues and the people we are voting for. So I'm going to give you some things to consider. and places that you can find quality information so you can make the best decision. Next, please. Next, questions to ask before voting. Does the information make sense to you? If you do not understand the information, who do you trust to help you understand? And about the candidate or the proposed amendment or initiative, will this candidate or initiative help people with disabilities? Does the information provide both the pros and cons of an issue? And will additional money be raised? And if money will be raised, how will the money be raised? Will it be through a tax? And how will you pay for the tax? And you could ask yourself, is it a good use of money? Will it help yourself or people that you know? Next. Okay, so those are several questions that you should ask. But where do you find the information? The American Association of People with Disabilities is a cross-disability coalition that represents people with disabilities from all 50 states, and cross-disability just means it represents people with all kinds of disabilities. And their website has lots of information about the importance of voting. The Save Go Voter project is a website geared for people with intellectual disabilities, and so they can help you. The League of Women Voters of Colorado is another good website, and they may give you specifics on Colorado specific issues, and Count Me In gives educates people on the statewide ballot initiatives, and they are a good source. And your public library is also a source. You can talk to a librarian or somebody behind the information desk and ask for voter information. It's important to get both pros and cons of all of the measures on the ballot. So thank you. And does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you so much, Dawn. We do have a question. One of our participants asked, what are some things voters should watch out for while researching? There are so many options online now. Are there any general red flags that we should know about?
So if a source only presents all the positives and doesn't give you any negatives or any cons. It may be biased or pro one side. So you may want to look at another source to see what other people are saying, because there are often people for an issue or a candidate and people who are against amendment or a candidate. So it's important to read or research so you can hear both the pros and cons.
Great, and we'll keep the chat open or the questions open to see if anyone else does have anything. I just want to kind of emphasize something Dawn said, because I love it. Going to your local library and asking a reference librarian for help or to find information on those valuable resources. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dawn. If we have any more questions about this topic, we'll come back to them at the end. Next, we're going to introduce Luke from the Arc Arapahoe in Douglas County. Luke.
Well, hi, welcome. Thanks for letting me be on here today. I'm Luke Whelan with the Arc of Arapahoe in Douglas County. We are an advocacy organization that helps people with intellectual and developmental disabilities within the Arapahoe and Douglas County, excluding the city of Aurora. Our friends over the Arc of Aurora help out over there. Next slide, please. I get to talk about if you have someone you want to help you vote, or if you're a staff member or support family member that wants to help someone vote, some strategies to do that. The first is just being prepared. So, talking with the people with disabilities that want to vote, figuring out why it's important to them, what issues they see in government might need some change. The people that are going to vote need to decide who they want to vote for. So helping them do research on fully understanding the options available to make informed decisions around voting. Every county clerk's website has a list of candidates and ballot initiatives in your area, so you can always go there as a starting point, and then off to their website or Facebook page for different candidates. If you're a person helping someone look into how to vote or voting, make sure you stay impartial, regardless of your views, making sure that you give structured ways to give both sides of an argument for a candidate or an initiative. And then, if you're an agency and you have someone that's really particularly involved in voting, really interested, making sure that they're working a lot of shifts or working certain shifts leading up to and on the day of voting so they can help those individuals. Next slide, please. We can work with individuals with disabilities by creating a support plan. So figuring out the best plan of getting their vote in. If it's by mail, making sure there's a plan that helps the individual vote from home. So maybe it's a relaxed pace, maybe it's breaking the ballot into smaller chunks. So making sure you're taking the time and planning ahead, so you can make sure we have enough time to get those ballots returned. If by mail, remember putting a stamp on it roughly about a week before the actual day of voting, should make it so it should arrive on time, or you can always, as others have said, use one of the local drop boxes in your area. If you're taking someone to vote in person, plan ahead. Research the polling station, drive by the location with the individual so you can see it and so you have an idea. Research the practicalities of what you need, so making sure you have the right ID, that they have a snack or water available, that sunscreen, umbrellas, warm coats. You never know here in Colorado, the weather likes to change in this early fall time. So also who's going to be driving that day, if they're taking Lyft or Uber or the bus. So you plan out the schedule so we all have that worked out. Next slide, please. You can also create a social story. So if we have individuals that struggle with anxiety or not knowing what's coming up next, or just worrisome, or just like to know, kind of what to expect. Social stories are a great narrative that can illustrate certain situations and problems and help people interact and deal with them prior to being in that situation. Stories are typically in the first person. They need to have a kind of beginning, a title, introduction, body, conclusion, and they're pretty supportive in answering the who, what, where, why, and how, to help someone kind of process before actually going to maybe a voting place or voting at home by mail. Next slide, please. The last thing here is just making sure we're creating that buzz. As a person supporting someone to vote, try to make the experience as joyful as possible. You can make a day of it. If you're taking individuals to the polling place, then maybe off to the coffee shop or lunch, to show off your I voted stickers. The polling locations, as kind of talked earlier, that you need to make sure those polling officials know what the person with the disabilities needs might be when they're casting that ballot. So you might be in the booth with them because that is one of the accommodations they need. Next slide, please. And then sharing and inspiring others. So if a person that you're supporting wants to vote, make sure that and they want to share their story or social media with others. Great. You're not allowed to take pictures inside of polling locations, but you can outside of the drop box. My daughter and I typically have one where she puts the ballot in when I take a picture. If you're going to take a picture of your ballot, that's fine. Just you want to make sure not to have some personal information on there. And if someone's voting early, making sure that they're sharing that story of them voting, because that can definitely encourage others to vote. And the more people with disabilities and their families and friends that vote, it increases the voices of our communities. So next slide, please. And if you have any questions about that for here in Arapahoe or Douglas County, or anything else advocacy wise, please reach out to the Arc Arapahoe Douglas. Thanks for having me on today.
Perfect. I know we have a lot of caregivers and we have some staff and DSPs on the call. So if anyone does have questions, I'd love to make sure we get some specific answers for you about how you can ask for help or how you can give help to somebody who is voting. Oh, there we go. So do you have any suggestions for how to bring up voting to individuals with IDD who haven't done so before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the biggest ones is you can start by showing short videos of individuals voting. The one that Evan used today is a great one of getting people engaged in voting, and understanding that it's their right to vote. So letting them know with those kind of quick short videos of what that looks like. The social stories are a great thing too, to use to kind of focus in on what voting really means, so that to the individual directly.
Great, and we have another question as well. Is there anything we need to think about if we deliver someone's ballot to a drop box for them with their permission? I'm assuming in this situation, and Amy, feel free to clarify if I'm off base, where they might not be there with you.
So maybe one of the county clerks can answer this one a little better, but I'm pretty sure here in Colorado you can support people in voting, as they wouldn't be able to drop it off with you. That should be, I believe that's fully legal, but don't quote me on that. But one of the county clerks might be able to step in on that.
Perfect. The beauty of having so many great experts on this call is we can phone a friend. So Peg or Luke, do either of you want to weigh in on this question?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, as long as the voter has already signed the ballot, because they have to sign the outside of the ballot envelope. So if the voter has signed the ballot envelope and completed that, it's perfectly legal for someone else to drop it off at the drop box for them. And you don't have to be with them. I drop off my husband's ballot at the drop box just because it's on my way to work and not on his way to work. So anybody can do that. There is a limit under state law that you can only drop off up to 10 ballots besides your own in an election. But unless you're worried about how many you're doing, if you're just talking about doing one or two for people that you work with or live with or are caretakers for, that is not a problem at all.
Great, thank you so much, Peg. I love Luke's idea about making a day of it too, going out to lunch, grabbing coffee, really getting into the kind of the fervor and making it about the community. So I think that's such a cool idea. It's often what I do when I vote. Any other questions? Well, seeing none, why don't we move on to Peg from Arapahoe County? Peg.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Peg Pearl. I am the Director of Elections in Arapahoe County. And I just want to let everyone have an idea of what happens to your ballot after you do vote. So as we said, you can return your ballot a couple different ways. And we want to kind of take you a little through the process of what happens after that. Next slide. So every ballot that comes back into our office will go through a process, and most of this process is governed by state law. So whether you're in Arapahoe County with us or in Douglas County with Luke, this is going to be the same process. I do want to mention one thing, which is if anybody does want to return their ballot by mail through the US mail, you can do that. The postage for that is one stamp, like one forever stamp or one first class stamp, which I believe right now is 58 cents. So you can return it in the US mail and we'll pick it up from the post office, or we'll get them from those drop boxes that you've heard us all talking about. Most people return them through the drop boxes, but you can do it through the mail as well. So we go out and collect the ballots is the first step. Then we weigh them and sort them. This is where we'll do the sorting. If I get in Arapahoe County, some of those Douglas County ballots that Luke was talking about, we'll sort them and get them over to Douglas County right away. We do check those signatures on the outside of the envelopes. Obviously, then we open the envelopes. We'll do the scanning, which will be how we tabulate the ballots or count the votes. We do a little resolution if needed to decide what exactly the voter intended for us to count. And then the final actual tabulation or count. So we're going to walk through these steps with some pictures for you to be able to visualize the process. Next slide. All of our ballots are retrieved using bipartisan ballot security teams. So we'll have a Republican and a Democrat, for example, together that are sworn election judges that are trained to go out and get these boxes from all, or get these ballots from all the drop boxes. They work together to keep secure chain of custody, keep things locked and safe. So we make sure that all of those ballots are coming back where they need to go to the warehouse or sorted and given to other counties if need be. Next slide. As they come back to our warehouse, they go through, like I said, and they sort them out from all of the drop boxes. We're doing this every single day right now. Our teams go out every day. And the last time we go out will be 7 p.m. on final election day, November 2nd. That's when we lock the boxes. So if you've already put your ballot out there or you are thinking to put your ballot into a drop box, you can use Ballot Track, which is a national or a statewide process to get a little note when we have your ballot. And that for Arapahoe County is when our ballot goes through this machine, the Agilis machine. We scan the barcode on the outside of the envelope, and that's how you get the notification to know that we have your ballot now in the warehouse. Next slide. We next go to signature verification. And so signature verification is where, like I said, the voter has to sign the outside of the envelope. If the voter is unable to sign because of a physical disability, they can just make a mark of some sort, and then there is a witness line where a witness can sign for them, and that would be acceptable as well. But one of those two things has to take place, either a voter signature or a mark and a witness signature. So we look at all of those. If the signature is just missing or if it doesn't match, we compare it to past ballot signatures, to signatures on driver's licenses and voter registration applications. If it doesn't match, then our bipartisan teams of election judges will look at all of those. If decide it's not a match, then they will send out what's called a cure notice, which gives the voter a chance to fix the signature and give it back to us so that we can then go ahead and process the ballot. Next slide. This is what a cure notice looks like, just so you can kind of visualize it. So if you get one of these in the mail or by email, it means we have not been able to open your ballot and you need to do something for us to be able to do that. You have to fill out a form. You can do it by email, by fax if you want to, in person, or there's even directions on the letter for doing it on your phone. So we'll need a little signature. you to fill out the form to say, yes, it is your ballot, and a copy of an ID. And the letter like this will explain all of it. And you have until 8 days after the election to get all that information back to us so that we can actually open up and count the ballot. Until then, we're going to put it to the side and wait. Okay, next slide. So for all of the ones that the signatures have been checked, they move on to ballot opening. If you've noticed, we color code things a lot in our warehouse. So ballot opening is purple stage. And we again have bipartisan teams opening these ballots up and getting them ready for tabulation, which is the next step on the next slide. We have scanners that we put the ballots through, and they will take a picture of it, a digital image, and that's how they will scan to be able to see what has been marked. We have these same teams will do what's called adjudication. If there's any marks that are unclear, or if there's a problem, maybe somebody used a red pen or something that didn't show up so well on our scanning. Our teams are trained with state voter guide to make sure that the voter's intent is clear. If you make a mistake on your ballot, that's okay. There's instructions on there to just cross out the name of the person you didn't want to vote for and fill in the one you do. And that's what the people in this room make sure that they're following. They're looking for crossouts and annotations just in case people made a mistake so we can count it the right way. Next slide. So one of the important things to note again is that you need to get the ballots to us by 7 p.m. on November 2nd. Just putting it in the mail and having a postmark isn't enough. We have to have it in our Dropbox or in our hands by 7 p.m. on election day, so we can do this whole process that we just talked about.
Perfect. I have a few questions for Peg, and I'll give some time to the Q&A. Peg, how can you find your Dropbox?
So every county has either inside your ballot packet, there is a list of all of the drop boxes in your county. So you can look at those instructions and look at that list. Or every county also has a website. Usually ours is arapahoevotes.com. And we list all of them there. And if you use the website, for example, we have a tool called Find My Nearest where you can find the one that's closest to you.
Thank you. And we'll make sure to include the websites for our county partners in the follow-up email. Another question is, what happens if I mail my ballot and then forget that I mailed it and go to vote in person?
Sure. So the great thing about our system, remember where I showed the picture of the machine that scans those ballots, as soon as we get a ballot envelope back and we scan that barcode to say that it's been received, we actually upload that into our statewide voter registration system. So that's the same system that the people at the vote centers are pulling up on their computer. So if you walk into a vote center, that database has already been updated to show that your mail ballot was already received. So the people at the vote center would tell you, we've already received a mail ballot from you. And so they would have that conversation with you, and then hopefully that would remind you, oh yeah, I did send it in. I'm glad you guys got it. Maybe you were nervous it wouldn't get there in time, but that means we received it. And so that way we make sure also that people aren't double voting improperly.
Perfect. One other question we got through the chat. Why are the ballots weighed?
So in Arapahoe County, we're a big county. We send out 420,000 ballots every time. We weigh the ballots in trays as a way of estimating how many ballots are received instead of counting each one by hand. So we know that an empty tray weighs a certain amount, and we know each ballot weighs a certain amount. So we have a scale that is programmed to do a little math that based on the weight, it tells us how many ballots are in the tray. And that's our way of shortcutting the counting process to know how many came from each drop box, so we know how busy the different drop boxes are.
Great. I don't see any more questions, but if you have a question for Peg, please throw it into the Q&A or raise your hand at the end when we go back for questions. Now we have our last presenter, Nick. Nick, if you want to join with your picture and unmute. Nick is one of our interns from Developmental Pathways. Nick and I are going to work together on his presentation, and Nick's going to be talking about voting and self-advocacy. Next slide, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Nick Applewitz.
Nick, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am 34 years old and I've been learning about this internship and I've been learning a whole lot.
And where around the Denver metro area do you live?
I live in Aurora, Colorado.
How long have you lived in Aurora?
20 years.
Wonderful. Next slide, please. So Nick, what interests you about voting?
What's interesting about voting is I learned a whole lot about that you could vote and why voting is important, and it taught me a lot about voting.
Wonderful. And you know, through this internship, Nick, you've been learning a lot about the history of voting.
Yes.
What can you tell me, what interests you about the history of voting?
In the 1900s, people of women and women of color or any color couldn't vote because of their color and racist. And that's what I learned about voting. That's what it taught me to do.
How do you feel about people not being allowed to vote?
It makes me feel sad because you have a voice what is important to vote.
Great. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide.
Yeah.
What was your experience with voting?
When I was 18, I got to vote for the first president, and when I turned 21, I got to vote for the seventh president.
Great. And was it easy for you to go vote, or was it fun?
Well, my dad took me and read me the questions, but I did all the answering.
Great. Did you go vote in person, or do you like to vote via mail?
I went and voted by in person.
Do you normally vote in person, or do you like the mail?
I like the mail better.
Why?
Because you are reading the questions, and sometimes the questions on the vote is different than in person, and then doing it on the mail vote.
Do you mean, when you mean the questions are different, do you mean you have more time to kind of think and ask for help?
Yes.
Great. Next slide, please. When you're looking for questions to understand the ballot, where do you go to find information?
You could go to, like earlier, you could go to your library or your calendar and ask someone to help you.
Perfect. Do you like to ask people for help, or do you like to go online?
I like to ask for help or go online to find the information.
Perfect. Do you like to watch your local news?
I do.
Great. Next slide. Oh, sorry, go back. I forgot a question. You know, why is it important for you to be informed about what you're voting on?
Because you want to know what you're looking for and what information is about voting, so you know what information you are learning about.
Next slide, please. Nick, why does your vote matter?
My vote matter because I have a disability, and my voice matter because you want your vote to be heard.
Great, you answered both those questions. Next slide, please. You know, Nick, we've talked a lot in this internship. What issues, we've talked about transportation, Social Security, work. What are some of the issues that you care about and why?
The most issues that I have is transportation for people with disability, because the SSRI is never on time, and that's our issue for transportation for us to go to work and stuff and to be on time and everything.
Okay. Next slide, please. Why is self-advocacy important to you?
Because being a self-advocate means everyone has told me no, and hearing no means no, but being a self-advocacy is speaking up to yourself and having a voice and standing up for yourself.
Great. What advice do you have for people that around self-advocacy?
Never to give up on your dreams and hopes.
Great. And you've talked about if you could talk to other people with disabilities, what would you tell them about being brave?
To have courage and have positive attitude.
Next slide, please. Next slide. And Nick, for the last question, I forgot to write it down, but I know we've talked about it. Is voting a part of self-advocacy for you? Is it important?
It is important because I want my vote to be heard and to be mattered.
That's it. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Nick. And I'm actually going to ask Evan to come back on for a question that we didn't answer earlier, and I'm going to throw it out to you as well, Nick.
Okay.
So Nick, one of the questions we got in the chat was, what was your experience as voting? You talked a little bit about that it was exciting. Was it challenging? Was it difficult when you went to vote for the first time?
When I voted for the first time, it was challenging because the questions were weird, but someone did help me vote it to understand, and it taught me a lot about those questions because they are tough questions, but I got through them by someone reading the questions to me.
Great. Sounds like you had a great support person to help you.
Yes.
Evan, what about you? What was your experience like voting?
It was good. I knew most of the big stuff, but I had to get help with some of the smaller issues and people that kind of I didn't really know, or it was easy because some of it one person was on running against no one else. So I always thought it's important, all of them, but some were not really not understood, but kind of knew about certain people, what they were running for.
This is great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Another question that we got when someone registered, and I believe they're on the call, so if I don't word this correctly, please let me know. How did your internships go? How have your internships been? How did the research go from your perspective? Have you been liking the internship? Have you been liking what you've learned? What have you been researching?
Who you're asking?
You can go first, Nick.
Oh, well, I've been learning a whole lot of stuff about being a self-advocate, learning how to speak up to yourself, learning about this job internship taught me about voting, what was like people here in Colorado, it's your own guardian, you can vote, but I understood if you are a guardian, you can't vote. So I've been learning a whole lot of different ways about voting and what it means to teach you, because a lot of people, they have that back in the day.
Great. That was a really big surprise and concern for both of our interns. Was in Colorado, if they have a guardian, they can vote. But if they lived in another state, if they had a guardian, they might not be allowed to. Evan, what about you? Same question. How's your internship been going?
It was good. Kind of once I got all the information, it was just kind of practicing over and over so I could get it kind of right. But it was a good experience.
Great. Another question let's start with Evan this time. Evan, what's the biggest barrier to voting, do you think? Or the reason why people don't vote?
I guess they don't understand all the issues.
Great.
That's why there's kind of the voter guide, I guess. to kind of understand what's going on.
Great. Thanks. Excellent. Nick, what about you? What do you think is a reason why some people, especially people with disabilities, might not vote?
Can maybe they are scared to vote, or that they don't have a reason why they should vote, and you shouldn't have to be scared of voting.
Great. Those are some great barriers to identify. I'm going to invite all our panelists back on the call to just turn your video on. And if there's any other questions that we might have missed, or if you didn't get a chance to answer, we are about 15 minutes ahead of schedule, which never happens. So feel free to throw some questions in the chat.